A series event with Joe Wos. It's my pleasure to now introduce Mr. Wos, a fellow Woodland Hills alumnus like myself. Joe is a 1988 graduate of Woodland Hills High School. He's a self-described illustrator, writer, author, performance artist, graphic facilitator, storyteller, keynote speaker, consultant, pop culture historian, master maze maker, and actor. But Mr. Wos is best known, though, as a cartoonist, where he has carved out an amazing career. From performing with the Pittsburgh Symphony to creating the world's largest hand-drawn maze, Joe has made himself a fulfilling career doing the thing that he loves. It is my pleasure to have Joe back at his alma mater, and on behalf of the whole school, Joe, welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, it is really kind of cool to be back here. Once you graduate and you get into your 20s, you'll have nightmares where you think you didn't finish high school and you have to go back. Having now done that, it's not so bad. It's actually quite nice to be back here, and it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. A little bit about me. He gave you sort of a quick overview, and I'm going to go into quite a bit more detail, sort of my life and my career. At the end, I'll give you a chance to ask any questions. And I'll break it up a little bit. Some of it is going to be a slide presentation, me talking. Some of it's going to be me doing some drawing. And I sort of thought that's sort of the best place to open is with me drawing. Just to show you that I actually am a real cartoonist and not just somebody who claims to be one. So I need an animal. Someone who can name a kind of animal.
Elephant.
I heard elephant over here. I'm gonna go with elephant. I need a sport that people play. Football. Football, naturally, it's Woodland Hills, we expect nothing less. And I need something unusual that you wear.
A sombrero.
A sombrero. Thank you. So we have elephant, sombrero. So we're going to have a sombrero wearing elephant playing football. All right, here we go. And there we go, an elephant wearing a sombrero playing football. Okay, so I am a cartoonist. I do a lot of different things, as they mentioned. I'm primarily known for mazes. I have a syndicated feature called Maze Toons, which are cartoon illustrated mazes. You can sort of see a little bit of that in the background. And what's unique about my mazes, as you can see, is they're actually solvable. So you could actually go through here, through this line, through here, and all the drawings are part of the maze. And it's sort of a unique niche that I made for myself. And I think that's going to be the theme you're going to see throughout this presentation, is that there's an old saying. I came to a fork in the road, and I chose the path less traveled. I came to a fork in the road, and I basically sort of took out a weed whacker and just made my own path. And that's the theme you're going to see again and again, is this idea of whatever you're doing in life, be original, make your own way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, my life and growing up a bit. So I grew up in Braddock. I actually grew up in North Braddock. That's me. As a kid, I was born in 1970, and I grew up I was 77, 80, and it was a very different time, and in some ways there are some similarities now. We lived in constant fear of a couple things. We lived in constant fear of a nuclear holocaust, the metric system, and bad fashion choices was the other one we really feared. And it was a very different kind of era. My dad was a steel worker, and he worked at Edgar Thomson Works in Braddock. And back then, we had a thing called pollution. You may have heard about it. And whenever I would look down to the mill, I would say to my dad, "Where do you work?" And he would point to the mill, and all you would see was this, smoke. You would just see smoke pouring out of Braddock. That was all you'd see. You wouldn't see much else. Every night, the sky lit up bright red. And in the mornings, in the summertime, if you went without your shoes, the sidewalks actually sparkled from the chemicals that were lying on the ground. The snow would look like it was silver. It would actually sparkle. And as horrible as all that sounds, it was beautiful. And it was a big part of my childhood, my dad growing up in the mill. So I would ask my dad, "Where do you work?" And he would point to the mill, and he'd say, "I work in the powerhouse." And at 5 years old, that's a pretty cool job. Your dad makes steel and power. In Pittsburgh, that was one of the best jobs you could have. You were a steel worker. Now, when I was in kindergarten, I went to Ben Fairless Elementary. I think Ben Fairless is still, how many of you went to Ben Fairless? Anybody go to Ben Fairless? Great, awesome. I went to Ben Fairless for kindergarten. And I had a teacher named Mr. Weaver. He may still be there, who knows. But Mr. Weaver was the art teacher. He was there, a couple days a week and would teach art class. And we were having a parent-teacher evening, where the parents would come that evening. And we were assigned to draw where we wanted to work when we grew up. 5 years old, we had to know what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I knew what I wanted to be at 5 years old. I actually wanted to be a steel worker like my dad. But my dad makes power, my dad makes steel. That's pretty cool. I want to be a steel worker. And so Mr. Weaver told us, "Take your piece of paper. I want you to take your time. I want you to color it beautifully. I want it to look perfect. I want it to look like, show me exactly whether you want to be a doctor or a veterinarian, whatever you want to be when you grow up, I want you to show me." And so I took a black crayon and I drew something like this. That was to me what Braddock looked like. That was the mill. That was where my dad worked, because I drew all the smoke. I finished it in about 5 seconds, and I turned it into my art teacher, Mr. Weaver, and he freaked out. He flipped out. He started yelling and screaming at me, "You don't know how to follow directions. You don't know what you're doing. Wait till your parents see this. They're going to be furious. You should be ashamed." It just went on and on yelling at this little 5-year-old me, and I was crying. I had like snot bubbles forming in my nose and everything, and I was heartbroken, and I was terrified of my parents coming in later that day. Well, all the drawings in the hallway were put up except for mine. And Mr. Weaver asked to meet my parents, and my parents came over, and he said to my dad, he said, "Your son was told to draw what he wanted to be when he grew up." And he drew this. And my dad took one look at it and said, "That's the steel mill in Braddock." My dad knew immediately that was the mill. And my dad started yelling at Mr. Weaver, "How could you live in Pittsburgh your whole life and not know that is a mill? That a beautiful drawing it is, how wonderful." And my dad was just enthusiastic over the drawing. At that exact moment, my whole life shifted, because I no longer wanted to be a steel worker. I wanted to be a cartoonist. And the reason I wanted to be a cartoonist was twofold. Number one, there's no wrong way to draw cartoons. Okay, Bugs Bunny looks nothing like a real rabbit. Mickey Mouse doesn't look like a mouse. If you draw one arm real long, one arm real short, it doesn't matter, it's a cartoon. You can do whatever you want in cartoons, there's no wrong way to do it. And no one would ever be able to tell me I was drawing it wrong again. The other reason I wanted to be a cartoonist was Mr. Weaver loved cartoons, and he collected autographs from cartoonists. And I swore from that day on, someday, I would become a famous cartoonist, and when he asked my autograph, I would tell him no. Because sometimes in life, you never hear this, but sometimes in life, we succeed not in spite of people, but to spite people. There is a great power to wanting to succeed to prove all those other people wrong who said you wouldn't be able to do it. That one teacher who said, "You're doing this wrong," inspired me. Now, I was lucky because throughout the rest of my life, I had great teachers. I went to St. Brendan's School, where I had a wonderful teacher named Miss Flowers, who always encouraged me to draw. I then went to St. Joseph's in Braddock, and then I went to Forest Hills Middle School at the time, and then Swissville High School, and then I was the first graduating class in 1988 of Woodland Hills High School. And I had great teachers who encouraged me all along, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. That was the moment. My parents always encouraged me to draw, and that's one of the things you need is encouragement to be an artist. Being an artist is filled with lots of rejection. You're going to have lots of people say you're not good enough or it's not quite what we're looking for. There's a lot of it. Charles M. Schulz, the creator of Peanuts, was rejected over 100 times. Dr. Seuss, rejected over 100 times. It's a tough job. So you've got to get used to rejection, but you also still need those voices that say, you can do this, stick with it. I was lucky that my parents did that and I had teachers who did that. Whether it's your friends, your parents, or yourself, you have to have a voice that say, you can do this. So, this is what I draw like now. This is from my book, Amazing Animals, published by Barron's Books. This was published last year. It was a bestseller, did extremely well. And this is one of my mazes from my rainforest maze. As you can see, you start at the start and you actually go through all the illustrations. There's a lot of detail in the drawing. It's, I think, not bad. It's a pretty good drawing. The characters are well developed and are based on real animals. I did not always draw like this. Okay? What I'm about to show you is frightening. I received this in the mail from my old middle school teacher who kept all of the school newspapers and all my original drawings. Okay? What you're about to see is absolutely terrifying. This is what I drew like when I was 14 years old. It's horrible. It's really, really bad. That is not a good drawing. This person should not have grown up to be a cartoonist. I should have quit right then and there. When my daughter, who is now 13, she was 11 when she saw this, I showed her to encourage her. I said, here's one of my drawings from when I was your age. And she looked at it and she goes, Dad, you really stunk. You were a really lousy artist. Why did you keep drawing? Like, why? I mean, you're not that good. And I said, I didn't know I wasn't that good. I just knew it was something I wanted to do. I loved it. I loved drawing. And eventually, I got to the point where I was as good as I thought I was. All right? Here's another one. This one, a little bit later, a little bit better. This is from 1991 when I was 21 years old. The characters are still very clunky and very sort of, they have these, they're very, very thick drawings. They're called big feet drawings. But you can see I'm starting to develop my niche for these mazes. So getting better. This is 1992. A lot more detail and a little bit better. Okay? So why did I keep up with something that I wasn't that good at and I love to do? Well, I guess the reason is a story my dad used to tell me. My dad would always tell me that a bumblebee is far too big and heavy for it to actually fly. Its wings are too small, and a bumblebee should not be able to fly. And I always say to my dad, then how does a bumblebee fly? And he said, because no one ever told him he couldn't do it. And that was the secret to why I kept at it. No one ever told me, you should quit. You're not good enough. People said, keep at it. And I told myself to keep at it and never give up. And so I never did. I constantly improved until I finally got to the point where I was as good as I thought I was. So I had drawn cartoons my whole life. At age 14, I started drawing professionally. I would draw at school festivals and caricatures. State representative at the time, Tom McClovick, was the first person to hire me. In Braddock, I actually drew at a community festival. And then I drew at Good Shepherd's festivals and things like that. In '88, I came to Woodland Hills High School, and I was a member of the school newspaper. And I did a comic strip called District with a K. At the time, there was a movie called America with a K. It had the K backwards. It was about this communist takeover of America. And I had done a comic strip about the school getting taken over for this merger. And the school administration at the time had seen it and contacted the principal, Frank Sockman, and said, you have to kick Joe Wos off the school newspaper. He's not allowed to work for the school newspaper anymore. We don't ever want to see his cartoons again. That's it, get rid of him. So I was called to the office by Mr. Sockman, who looked like Elmer Fudd. And that's how I always draw him. And I would actually walk behind him and go, be very, very quiet. And Frank Sockman called me into the office and he said, I've got to talk to you, son. And I said, what is it, Dad? Because he called me son, I always called him Dad. Just he called everybody son. He said, the school administration saw your comic and you're off the newspaper. You can't draw cartoons for this school anymore. But I want you to draw for the yearbook. You can draw whatever you want in the yearbook because by the time the district sees it, you will have already graduated and there's nothing they can do to stop you. And I was delighted because he actually gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted. Now, I was shocked and surprised because I said to Mr. Sockman, I said, I'm kind of surprised because my comics can be a little mean, and they're especially mean to you. You're the principal, and I make fun of you. I kind of thought I'd be in a lot of trouble. And he said, not at all. He said, I've always felt if we can't laugh at ourselves, who can we laugh at? And I said, you're absolutely right. If we can't laugh at you, who can we laugh at? And to his credit, he supported me 100%, and in the yearbook, I drew all the teachers I could think of. And I was pretty mean, but they loved it. So I drew a centerfold of all the teachers. This is 1988. And there they are. They're all gone on, but there's Frank Sockman. See, he looked just like Elmer Fudd. There's one teacher who I drew as a moose. So that was great. It was a lot of fun. And so I managed to get in one last word before I graduated, thanks to Frank Sockman. By 1990, I was in my 20s, and I started drawing cartoons at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And I would have kids come up and say, draw me a monkey, draw me a chicken, draw me a walrus, draw me all these things. And then kids started asking questions like, well, what's the name of this dog, and where does he live? And before I knew it, I was telling stories about these characters. And that turned into a stage show called Once Upon a Toon, where I would draw stories as I tell them live on stage. Actually, I'm going to do a sample of one in just a second. I have the great pleasure, a single show might be 20 drawings. I'm constantly drawing and telling stories. And I performed at Jazz Fest in New Orleans on stage. I performed at children's museums all over the country. I performed on television. I performed just everywhere. And it's been a great experience. I've actually performed in, let's see, 46 states nationwide. And I've also performed in Belgium and France as well. So I get to tour over the country. Let me give you an example of what I do. One of the questions I get asked more than any other question is, how did you learn to draw so good? There are two answers to that question. The first answer is this: practice. Lots and lots of practice, because practice makes pretty good. Nobody's perfect. I'm still learning. I don't have to be the best in the world. I just have to be the best me that I can be. And that's all anyone expects of you, is to always be the best you that you can be. The second answer to that question, how did you learn to draw so good, is learning to draw is as easy as A, B, C. Let me show you what I mean. At the top of my page, I'm going to put some letters. A, J, E, U, I, O, V, M, G, period, and a dash. Can anybody tell me what that spells? I love that you tried. That's great. Now, I'm going to give you a hint. It is a very popular animal. I'm going to give you another hint. The letters are scrambled and mixed up. Unscramble the letters, and you make the animal. Good? Good guess? All right, I'm going to give the answer. That spells rabbit. See, here's the problem. You're used to writing words. I'm going to show you how to draw a word. Watch, listen, learn, do as I do. You'll be able to draw a rabbit too. Once upon a toon, there was an animal. Animal begins with the letter A. In the middle of my page, not too big, not too small, I put a capital letter A. This particular animal loved to jump. Jump begins with J, so I put a J under the A to make an umbrella because it liked to jump in the rain. It liked to jump forwards and it liked to jump backwards. So I put the letter J, backwards. It likes to jump everywhere. Everywhere begins with E, so I put an E right there. It likes to jump everywhere, and it likes to jump every day, which also begins with E. It likes to jump under. Under begins with U, so I put a U under the J's. It likes to jump in. In begins I, put an I in the U. It could even do the 100-yard dash. Now, if something likes to jump under, it might like to jump over. Over begins with O, so put an O over and to the left of the A. If something likes to jump in, it might like to jump out. Out begins O, put an O out here. And it would never, ever stop, period. Period here, and a period here. Now, this particular rabbit had very, letter V again, messy hair. In fact, he was a messy hair. Messy begins with M, so I take the letter M over and over until it turns into a scribble. Now, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that this rabbit was great. Great begins with G, and I said stretch, so I'm going to take the letter G and stretch it. And everyone loved this rabbit. Everyone begins with E. Now, the reason everyone loved this rabbit was because this rabbit was so good, letter G backwards, to everyone, letter E backwards. This rabbit had a very fuzzy face that looked like this, and very, letter V, very long whiskers. And O, what a good and great rabbit he was. And that's how to draw a rabbit, the end. Now, that's what I use in a lot of my workshops, but a lot of my stories are much longer, of course, and have multiple drawings in them. And, but this is one that I always use as a great example to teach kids how to draw. And it's designed to be very accessible. And the way it originated is I'm dyslexic. So I had a lot of trouble learning to read and write when I was younger. And Miss Flowers, who I mentioned earlier, was the first teacher to say, instead of writing your words, draw your words. And so I started using letters and numbers to draw my drawings. And that gave me control over everything. That taught me to read, that taught me how to write, and that taught me how to draw. And I've been continued drawing ever since. So, I've toured all over the country performing with my show, and I ended up performing in Indianapolis at the Indianapolis Children's Museum in the year 2000. And this kid came up to me and said, "Wow, you're great. I'm a fan of Charles M. Schulz, and they're opening a Charles M. Schulz Museum. Do you like Snoopy?" And of course, Charles M. Schulz was my hero. He's one of the reasons I became a cartoonist, is I love the comic strip Peanuts. I drew Snoopy from a very young age. And I said, I love Peanuts, and the kid said, I'm applying for a job at the Schulz Museum. When I get the job there, you're going to be the first person I hire. And I said, all right, kid, great, nice talking to you. And a year later, I get a phone call from the Charles M. Schulz Museum saying, Jean Schulz, the widow of Charles M. Schulz, would like to see your work. Can you send out a video? Sent out a video, and they asked me to come out for their opening week to teach cartooning and do my performance on stage. I've been going back there every year for the past 15 years. I am the visiting resident cartoonist of the Schulz Museum. It's a great honor. It's something I love doing. And I've become very good friends with Jean Schulz. She's one of my closest friends. We actually go to Burning Man together. She's 80 years old. She does trapeze every Saturday, golfs and everything else. She's just wild and a lot of fun. And I absolutely love the museum. And about that time visiting, I also went down to San Francisco to visit the Cartoon Art Museum there. And it occurred to me that cartoon art museums are so cool, but yet there are not a lot of them in the United States. If you were to visit Brussels, there are 8 cartoon museums in that one city. There are dozens and dozens of cartoon museums throughout Belgium. In the United States, there's only 3. San Francisco, New York, and Columbus, Ohio. And then Pittsburgh is a 4th, but they're actually closing, I think, at one. So when I came back to Pittsburgh, I opened up the Toonseum. The Toonseum is Pittsburgh's Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art. It started as a gallery at the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and then expanded into its own gallery in downtown Pittsburgh. We added a second gallery called the Lou Shiner Gallery, and I ran that museum for 7 years. It was a great experience, no regrets at all. It was one of the finest cartoon museums in the country. We did exhibits on superheroes, we did exhibits on all sorts of artists, comic books, animation, comic strips, lots of great events. During my time at the museum, I did over 100 exhibits. And every year we did about 80 programs. So that gives you an idea of just how much work went into running that museum. And it was a great experience. After about 7 years, though, of putting other people's artwork on the walls, I began to sort of miss doing what I love, which is drawing. I began to miss being a cartoonist and following my dreams. And about that same time, the Toonseum was coming, my run at the museum was coming to end. My father passed away in a very, just sort of very rapidly, happened out of nowhere. We didn't expect it. And I sort of, talked to him before he passed away, and he kept saying, you need to follow what you're meant to do. And so I decided, okay, I was still performing, but I needed to follow what I really wanted to do, my lifelong dreams. My lifelong dreams, there was a couple. One was to publish a book. 2 was to become a syndicated cartoonist. And 3 was to break a world record. So, the first thing I did was I broke and set the world record for the world's largest hand-drawn maze. The maze was 4 feet high by 36 feet long. It was the largest maze ever drawn by hand in the world. I've since had lots of people try and break the record, and some have succeeded, and I will no doubt be breaking it again. It toured all over the country, and then last year I sold it to a company in Changzhou, China, and it's on display in a mall in China somewhere. I haven't been there, so I don't know where it is. Yes?
Were you rewarded for that, like breaking the record?
You're rewarded with lots and lots of articles and newspapers and interviews, but no money. But
yeah, still counts.
with that in mind, what I did to make money off of it was I did a Kickstarter where companies could buy sponsorship ads in the maze, or individuals. So you can see it's the Shell Games presents the Guinness World Record hand-drawn maze. Shell Games paid $1,000 to be featured in the maze. StarKiss paid $500 to be featured in the maze. And then when it was all done, years later, as I was getting ready to throw this out, I got a call from the company in Changzhou, China, and I sold the maze to them for $5,000. So it ended up being a nice little money-making venture. So that was goal 1 achieved. My second goal was going to be much tougher. I wanted to become a syndicated cartoonist. I knew I couldn't do a comic strip. I just didn't have the patience for it. I didn't want to develop characters. But mazes have always been a big part of my life. I've always drawn mazes since I was in high school, grade school. I would draw these mazes. And so I decided I would try and get syndicated drawing mazes. I sort of sat on this idea for about a year and didn't do much with it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I was also really afraid because I knew how tough syndication is. Syndication is what appears in the funny pages, all right? Every year, over 10,000 cartoonists submit to the syndicates. There are 3 main syndicates, and then they distribute the newspaper. 10,000 people. Of those 10,000 artists, only 6 a year will get picked to be syndicated. It is almost impossible to do. I have talked to all my cartoonist friends, and they had said, what happens is, you submit, you get rejected, you submit again, they'll give you some advice if they think it's good, you'll submit again. It can take years to get syndicated. One night, at about 1 a.m., I woke up and said, I'm going to do this. I started drawing all night. I started drawing mazes for newspapers, about this big, my syndicated mazes. Started drawing all these mazes. I drew about 20 mazes in one night. Put together a history of myself, put together this packet, and I went online to decide which syndicates to send to. Almost all the syndicates require you mail in samples, and then they send you a letter back saying thanks a lot. Creators Syndicate accepted online submissions, so I sent it to them first. Sent it online. I immediately regretted it. I felt like I had made a horrible mistake because I wasn't ready. And I said, oh, what have I done? I've ruined my chances. I talked again to my cartoonist friends. They said, don't worry, you're going to get rejected anyway. Everybody does. This gives you a chance to sort of revamp and reconnect. This was on Saturday morning. By Monday morning, I had a phone call from Creators Syndicate saying, we want to syndicate your comic. And it happened overnight, literally. And this is one of the things I tell people. 2 things. Know when you're ready. and try and prepare for that. Really know when you're ready. You saw the samples of the drawings of when I was a kid. I thought at age 12 I should be a famous cartoonist. I thought I was the best in the world. I learned as I get older, I'm not the best in the world, but what am I the best at? I'm the best at doing these mazes. So I learned this when I was ready. The second thing you have to do, and this sounds so strange, is practice being lucky. All right? What does that mean? That means you've got to have all the skill in the world, you've got to have the talent, you've got to have the ability, and then you have to be ready for when your moment happens. You can't let it pass you by. You have to be ready for it and you have to jump at the chance. And you never know when that moment's going to come. There are people who are some of the most talented artists I've ever met in the world, but their moment hasn't happened yet. But when that moment comes, you have to recognize it and you have to jump at the chance. And you have to be sure you're ready. Practice being lucky. This is an example of one of my Sunday mazes, inspired by the artist Jack Kirby. It's sort of an abstract maze, very tough to solve. These are two recent mazes. My mazes for my daily comic are usually based on things that are happening. So that was for Snake Day. This one just ran on President's Day. So I look for holidays, fun things like that. Sometimes I put my friends in them. I wanted to show you this one because I hate it. This ran in 2016. So that was 2 years ago. This one ran in 2018. Actually just this month. Look at those two drawings. Those are the same artists. That's me. This is when I started syndication. This is now. I've been at this my entire life, and I'm still getting better. I'm still learning. You never stop learning. You never stop improving your skills. You've got to keep at it constantly. Why did I get better? Well, for a couple reasons. One, my technique improved. So I switched from drawing with a marker. I would use a felt tip marker. I switched over to using a Wacom computer tablet. So I use a computer tablet now. My coloring skills got much, much better. The other thing that was a big change is I started adding more shading to my drawing. And the characters just developed. I got better at drawing the mazes as well. The biggest improvement was I simply just was drawing every day. Anytime you do something every day, you get better at it. So instead of drawing 10 mazes a year, I now draw over 500 mazes a year, counting the books. Speaking of books, that was the last thing on my list. I want to be a published artist. My first book was called The Three Little Pigs Burgers, as told in Pittsburghese. It is the story of the three little pigs told entirely in Pittsburghese. The entire book was written in that, our unique language. In the back, there's a dictionary. And it was a great success. Again, I did this on Kickstarter. I sold over 3,000 copies myself. It was so popular that last year, the Heinz History Center asked if they could buy the rights to the book. So I sold them the rights to the book, and they now sell it in bookstores throughout Pittsburgh. This book here was really important, a celebration of animation. It actually hasn't come out yet. It actually comes out in a couple weeks. This was the first book that I wrote. And I was approached by the co-author, Martin Gitlin, who said, would you like to write a book on the history of television animation and pick the top 100 animated cartoons? I said, sure, why not? I've written for the Trib, I write for newspapers, I want to write a book. The reason this book is so important is, first book that I really did a lot of research for, but through this book I got my agent. And my agent then, I approached her and I said, now that this book is done, I do these mazes. Do you think anyone would be interested in maybe doing a book of my mazes? And she said, let's try it. She shopped the books around, and we ended up going with Barron's Educational Books. The first book was Amazing Animals, and it was 50 animal mazes. The second book, which came out late last year, was Myths and Monsters, which featured cartoon monsters from around the world. That debuted at the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., which was a great honor for me. They actually sold out of the book, and it became a bestseller. All right. My next book, and you are the first to see this, no one has seen this yet, is Mesozoic, 50 Dinosaur Mazes. And it's going to be all dinosaur mazes, like this. There's the Stegosaurus maze. So I'm looking forward to that book. It was due about 3 weeks ago, and I'm still working on it, so hopefully I'll get it done very soon. Yes?
Where's like a local, like how can we purchase your book?
All my books are at any bookstore. You can go to Barnes & Noble, you can go to Amazon, anywhere carry the books. They're nationwide. I actually just got back from New York City. I was doing a book signing at several bookstores in New York. I travel around the country doing book signings. And I was at Toy Fair in New York this weekend too. So travel over. So, I'm going to give a chance to ask some questions. Before I do, I sort of wanted to end with this. Because I thought it's a great story to sort of close with before I move on to questions and talk a little bit more about my life. You remember that story about Mr. Weaver that I started with? And about how, I was very frustrated and everything else? I went back to Ben Fairless Elementary probably about 15 years ago. I was invited to do an assembly program for the kids, and Mr. Weaver was still there. And I told him the story of what happened. And he sort of apologized again, and he said, well, you grew up to be a cartoonist, and I'm glad to see that. And then, he was very, very effusive and apologetic. And then I did my show. And the kids loved the show, the teachers loved the show, it was a great presentation. And as I'm stepping off the stage, Mr. Weaver was with the principal. Principal shook my hand and said, wow, great job, great to have an alumni go on to success, and I really enjoyed your show. And Mr. Weaver turned to the principal and said, I taught him everything he knows. And in reality, in a way, he was right. And then Mr. Weaver asked me for my autograph, and I said no. So it came full circle. That is sort of my life in cartooning. What I'd like to do now is give you a chance to ask any questions you might have. Cartooning, entertainment, my career, other things I do, any questions at all you may have, I'd be very happy to answer, including if you want advice for something that you plan on doing or are doing now, anything at all, I'm very happy to answer.
We have the microphone, so just raise your hand and I'll bring it around.
You know how they did like a Garfield movie?
Yes.
Do you ever plan on doing like a movie of your cartoons?
I probably won't do a movie of these cartoons because they don't really translate to that well. I do have though, I did a pilot for a TV show called Once Upon a Toon. And one of my stories about this duck that wants to be a rooster, Dawn the Duck, is in that. And you can see the cartoon, the animated version, I think is online on YouTube. Made it pretty far at PBS, and then it just sort of didn't go through. But that's life. Sometimes projects go really far, sometimes you just gotta see what's next. So, but yeah, those will translate. Future, I plan on doing some other books, and I'm hoping maybe some of those, never know, might become a movie, never know.
Did you meet any other cartoonists?
Yes, I am lucky and privileged to count so many wonderful cartoonists among my friends. I've met, you name it, I've met them. Stan Lee, most of the guys from Mad Magazine are friends. Lots of celebrities, just because I do a lot of Comic-Cons. So I stay in touch with George Takei. I don't know if you guys know him from Star Trek. Carol Spinney, who was Big Bird, is a good friend and was a very good cartoonist. Stephen Pastis, who does Pearls Before Swine. The guy who does BC, Mason. Just tons and tons of cartoonists I've gotten to know very well. I go every year to the National Cartoonist Convention. It's called the Reuben Awards. It moves every year. We go there and we just sort of hang out. And it's tricky because being a cartoonist is a very solitary job. You are at a desk every day by yourself, sort of tuned out from the world. You have to get this work done every single day. And you have to work a couple months ahead. So you don't really get to socialize a lot, but once a year cartoonists sort of get together and they just hang out and have a good time. But we all stay in touch, through Facebook and phone calls and whatnot. So yeah, I've met a lot of cartoonists. I'm also lucky because I do a stage performance. I do get to sort of meet with the public a lot, and I do get to meet with a lot of people. So I'm lucky in that way. Any other questions?
How do you get like confidence? Like you're sitting here in front of people and showing off your art, and I know I would not be confident enough to do that. So like, do you have any?
Yeah, I got some great questions. Let me tell you, my family, when they found out, like cousins and everything, when they found out I was a stage performer who would go in front of, like a jazz fest, I performed in front of over 1,000 people on stage. On the other stage was Paul Simon, who's a well-known musician, and on my stage was me with 1,000 people in the audience, mostly kids. When my family found out, they said, that doesn't make sense that you would ever be a performer because you were so shy. You used to sit in the corner drawing, and that was it, and that seemed so shy. And then it sort of occurred to me, the reason I sat in the corner drawing is because if I knew I quietly sat in the corner drawing, every single person in that room would eventually come by and be like, what are you drawing? What are you doing? I knew I would be the center of attention by trying not to be the center of attention. Everybody just sort of disappears when you're on stage. Your audience is there, and you're interacting with them, but you're so focused on what you're doing that the rest of the world just sort of fades away, and it becomes intuitive. You can do it with your eyes closed. You just get so good at it. So the biggest thing is practice. The other thing is just to overcome that sort of anxiety. Start by treating everybody like a friend. You're probably very comfortable talking in front of your friends. If you're talking to them in a group, you don't even realize it. But right now, we're just having a conversation is all we're doing. It's just me and you. So it's getting to know you for the first time, you're getting to know me, it's just getting to know someone. So it's really not as intimidating as it seems once you start doing it. And you start to learn little tricks, and you start to just sort of overcome it. When I work with an audience, and I'm performing, I pick out usually 3 people in the audience, and those are the 3 that I'll look at. But everyone thinks I'm looking directly at them. You learn these little tricks as you go. But the best thing, advice I can always give on anything is there's nothing to it but to do it. You just got to get up and do it. And don't be afraid of failing. We all fail. Then you try again. Good question.
So, if you are just doing art like as a hobby and you feel like you can't like really focus on it, and like how did you like do art on top of like all the like other stuff?
Well, I will tell you this. I have ADHD, so I'm extremely unfocused. All right? So maybe it's a similar situation. You're wondering about that focus. How do I just sort of do this when it's so distracting? There's all these other things going on in the world. I'm terrible because I'm constantly on social media. I'm constantly got 100 things going on. I'm thinking about my next trip. I'm very, very scattered. I have moments of intense focus where I have a deadline and I say, the deadline is passed. Now I'm late. I have to get this done. And I will set out a whole day where I do nothing but draw. And I will get weeks ahead, and then I go back to being distracted again and doing all those other things. And then a deadline comes coming closer, and I go, okay, now I have to do this. You do whatever it takes, but you convince yourself that you have no choice but to do this. Cartooning, whatever your passion is, music, writing, it becomes a part of your life to the point where you do it to survive. It becomes such a part of your life that you need to do it. And that's what makes it happen. You say, I just don't have a choice. This is my life. This is like eating or breathing. I have to do this. And then you start to have moments where you have that clarity, where you're able to focus on it and make it a career. The biggest thing is making sure that you show up on time when you got to show up places, making sure you're meeting your deadlines when you can, try and focus on getting those deadlines done. But you find ways to do it because you're just driven. It's all you ever want to do with your life. So you just do it. Good question.
If it's not too much trouble, may you do another drawing, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let's try this. All drawings are basically just lines on a page. If you can draw a line, you can draw anything in the whole wide world. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, that is a scribble. Now, how many of you have ever looked at the clouds and thought that cloud looks like a monkey or a chicken or Lady Gaga? How have you done that? Yes. That is called using your imagination, or as SpongeBob would say, imagination. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I want you to look at this scribble and tell me what it looks like to you. Use all of your imagination, not just part of it. So don't say it looks like the handle of a teacup. Say it looks like a teacup. Say the whole thing. Yes?
A chip?
Good?
Some form of like mouth, like a smile.
A smile? Yeah, good.
Looks like
Koala, good. Any others?
Picture of you.
Picture, good. Okay, yes?
looks like a bird.
Yeah, good. Those are all good answers. I'm going to show you what I think it looks like. I look for what's familiar to me. Do I see eyes, a nose, a mouth? Something I'd see at the zoo, something I'd see at school, something I'd see in my neighborhood. I look for what's familiar. I think it looks like a bulldog. Okay? But it could have been just about anything. You're limited only by imagination. Imagination has no limit. That was pretty easy because I did that one. Could I have someone just draw a scribble? You don't have to draw. I just want you to put a scribble. Come on up. Yes. The girl who said she never comes on stage and is terrified of it. Come on up and draw.
You can do it this afternoon.
All I want you to do is put a scribble. Don't do anything else. Excellent. Thank you very much. Go ahead and have a seat. Sorry, hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. See how easy that was? I'll tell you the secret to it. One of the big secrets to it is, are you familiar with the story of Dumbo? Okay, well in the story of Dumbo, Dumbo wants to learn, he wants to be able to fly. And the reason he can fly is he's told, I'm going to give you a magic feather, and it'll allow you to fly. Well, the feather is useless. It doesn't do anything. But he thinks so long as he holds that magic feather, he can fly. Part of the secret to getting on stage is into having a magic feather, something that gives you confidence. In this case, this marker. I know so long as I have a pen or marker in my hand that I'm invincible, because the pen is mightier than the sword. And because I can do anything when I have a marker in my hand. So building that confidence, having that magical. So this is a very complex one. I love it. This is great. Any ideas? It's a tough one. It's a very tough one. Yes?
I forget those toys like this thing.
A slinky, yeah, slinky. Good. All right. So sometimes you got to think outside the box, and you have to draw upside down, sideways, all sorts of ways. I think it looks like a bug. Okay? So you have to turn it like that. And you've got a bug. Okay? So it's thinking outside the box there a little bit. There we go. Okay. All right. Any other questions for me? Yes?
So maybe not like a cartoon, like not a movie or anything, but with your style, probably do some kind of platform because you grew up with games.
Yeah.
You could do some kind of platform game. You ever thought about doing that?
I have thought about transitioning my mazes into an app. And I probably will do it at some point. It's all about sort of, deciding what projects are most important for you at the moment. And you prioritize. You prioritize in a certain order. That order goes, I need to make money so I can eat. So paying projects first. Second, I want to do the stuff that are my lifelong goals, the things I really, really love. Third, what are the things that are going to market me and build my audience? And then fourth, what are these other projects that I would like to get around to? So that tends to be the problem. Those things can bump up and change as you're doing things. I have a big project. I got to finish 2 books that have to be done by the end of this month. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And then I just got a contract for a comic book company, wants me to do some comic books. So we'll see. I'll probably take that job because that will allow me to eat. And then eating is good. I like to eat. Okay. Any other questions for me? Yes.
So what else do you do besides art? Like you used to, like, it wasn't, like, all about the money. Like, it's nice whenever the money does come, but, like, because, like, I do music, so my dad was telling me, like, oh, you need something to fall back on. Like, who makes $50,000 a year, da-da-da, like, off of music. And, you know,
Sure.
something to fall back on.
Sure. I'm going to give you 2 answers. The one that responsible grown-ups want me to give, and then the real answer. You should have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
Okay? You should go to college, you should get a diploma, you should get a degree in farming or coal mining, I don't know. You should get a grown-up job. Do something responsible. Here's the other answer.
Okay.
You can do what you have to do to make a living. Or you can do what you want to do to make a life. That's the difference. Okay? We all have to make a living. All right? I have 3 kids, so I have responsibilities to put food on the table. All right? And would I make more money if I were a Wall Street investor? Yeah, of course I would. But I'd be miserable, but I'd make more money. Do I make enough now? Yes, I make enough. To me, some years I have great years. Some years I have terrible years. But I'm doing what I love, and I'm bringing joy into other people's hearts. I'm making other people happy. If you are willing to put all your effort into it, and all your energy, and a lot of hard work into doing what you love, you will find some level of success. You might not be a millionaire, but you should be able to make a living at it, okay? You should be able to if you are doing your absolute best work, constantly improving, and working really hard. I work probably, honestly, 20 hours a day, because when I'm not drawing, I'm promoting, I'm marketing, I'm reaching out to magazines, trying to pick up more work. There's a lot of things that you got to learn. The one thing I will tell you is you should definitely, without doubt, no matter what it is you want to do, take as many business-oriented classes as you can. Learn how to manage your money, learn how to market yourself, learn how to promote, and learn how to run a business. Yes, I'm an artist and I sit around drawing funny pictures all day, but it's a business. And if I don't treat it like a business, I will fail. So your parents, grown-ups, whoever is telling you you need something to fall back on, they are right in the sense that you need all the skills to treat your passion like a business. Okay? So do what you love, but do it the right way. You know, do it the way that treats it like a business, and you'll succeed.
Let's thank Mr. Wos for his time today.
Thank you very much.
And we'd like to present him with a 1988 yearbook that he can take home for himself since
Thank
it
you
was
very much.
destroyed.
Mine was destroyed a couple years ago, so now I've got to go back and find everybody I went to high school with and have them sign it. So I look forward to doing that. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.